Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We are just starting off our special meeting for Wednesday, December the 18th, where we're going to be looking at a few different items here this morning. Just want to acknowledge a couple things as we get started here this morning. Councillor Ryan sends his regrets as he is unable to attend due to being out of town, and Councillor Warzanowski is joining us virtually today. So just want to acknowledge our two councillors that are just not in the room, but Councillor Warzanowski is joining us online. Starting with our land acknowledgement, as we call the meeting to order here this morning. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the Mokitas and the traditional Seven Territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Likal, Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Tsuut'ina Nation. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Optisa Métis government and the Métis Nation with Alberta District 4. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play on this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. This sacred gathering place provides us with an opportunity to engage in and demonstrate leadership on reconciliation, and we are honored to have you join us on Treaty 7 territory. I'd like to move to the approval of the agenda for our special meeting today. Can I have a councillor make the motion, please, to approve today's agenda? Is it showing up on your guys' screens? Because it's not showing up on mine. We're not getting the agenda on our screens. We're getting the live feed. Thank you. Can I, Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council approve the December 18th, 2024 special meeting of Council agenda with the following amendment. Add agenda item 3.1, fire union contract.
Thank you. With this being a special meeting, I'm wondering either through the CEO or to the Ledge Services, can you just explain the addition of the agenda item as per what happened with the signatories and things like that, just to demonstrate compliance with MGA and special meeting?
Good afternoon to the Mayor and Council. So to be able to add an item to the agenda, Council must, as per the Municipal Government Act, Section 194, subsection 5, it states that no matter other than the stated in the notice calling the special council meeting may be transacted at the meeting unless the whole council is present at the meeting and the council agrees to deal with the matter in question. In order for us to do this, Council all was required to sign a form stating that they are in agreeance to this, and then it was marked approved, and it'll be available for viewing if anyone should want to see so.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we just wanted to make sure that we paid proper acknowledgement to our fire union contract. And as people have seen with our budget deliberations, we have had marathon meetings. And so we just wanted to make sure that we gave that the proper time and respect that such a contract deserves. So with that, the motion's been made by our councillor. Can I call for the vote, please? Councillor Warzanowski, do you vote in favor of the approval of the agenda?
In favor. My hand is raised.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Warzanowski, just so you're aware, we can't see you at the moment. We can only hear you. So for the vote, I'll just ask you to verbally vote if you are in favor or opposed.
In favor.
Thank you. With that, that is carried. So now we'll move on to item 3.1, which is our fire union contract.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council, so we've had some long discussions about the fire union contract. The current contract expires at the end of December of this year. It was originally a 4-year term that took, about 3 years and 11 months to negotiate. Under the previous administration with the current fire union, we began conversations about 2.5, 3 months ago, spread out over 4 or 5 different meetings. I think we're happy to say that both sides, felt that this was more of a collaboration than a negotiation. Was still a negotiation, but at least on amicable and friendly terms. As I mentioned yesterday, I don't think necessarily either one of us is completely jumping up and down happy, which means I think we both did a good job of getting something that means it's a good agreement for both sides. So we talked about this yesterday. I don't believe council had any questions at that time. If there's anything you would like to address right now, as you notice, we have eight of our professional firefighters here to support this decision. And if council's in support of approving and ratifying this contract, we'll have a little signing ceremony here right after with the mayor and myself and get some pictures, and look forward to another good, strong 4-year collaboration with the Firefighters Association.
Great, thank you. So with that then, do we have a motion that we can put on the floor so then we can open up for discussion and debate? Great, thank you. Can I have a councillor make the following motion, please? Deputy Mayor Randhawa.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the council direct the mayor and CA to sign the fire union contract between the City of Chestermere and the Chestermere Professional Firefighter Association.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from council? Great, thank you. I'm assuming that we are all here in the spirit of collaboration, not 8 of us showing up to make sure that council signs this, right? Is that? So with that, we have the motion on the floor. Can I call for the vote, please? Councillor Wozinowski, do you vote in favor of the motion?
Yes, I vote in favor of the motion.
Great, thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Congratulations. We have our contract. We have our agreement with our firefighters association. With that, I believe what we were going to do. I think we should stay in public and do it live streaming. And this would be a little not of a regular practice, but I guess I will come down there, do some signatures, and we'll do some photos with that, and then we'll come back to the rest of our agenda. But we'll just continue live streaming as we're doing this.
Sounds good. Which way can they see us on the photo? Yeah. If we're standing over there?
Yeah, because that way their camera.
No worries. Thank you.
You're dating and I'm just signing, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate all your work.
Yeah, thanks.
I haven't had somebody take a picture of me signing something since I got married.
This is kind of like a different kind of.
I know.
It's gonna feel the same.
I know. I feel like there should be music playing in the background right now.
It's all good.
Should be a little teary-eyed.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Come around to this side.
Sure. There's actually.
This will actually
Just you.
Why don't we do that after this?
Sure.
I thought so. Just stand right here.
I had to make a joke.
Oh, absolutely.
It is kind of my style.
Well, you don't want to. Authenticity means. Good. Actually, my boy got called up to midget. So he's been playing a lot of that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's fine.
You want to know? How?
Just fell off a cliff.
I was downhill from there.
I was a horse that used to be put to sleep.
Oh,
That's it.
it's
That's
supposed to be up there. Instead of farting around over here.
Everyone's just.
Well, do you want to do one of the 4 of us to sign first, and then we'll bring
Everyone with everyone?
All right.
Push this down.
Yeah.
You're gonna put that down for sure.
The only one that makes me look good.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you can smile.
I'm gonna grab one on my phone too.
It was kind of.
Like, my wife would have loved that. She would take it.
Awesome.
Good. Council, do you want to come? Okay. With that, we are now moving forward with our capital budget presentation, and this is being presented by Mr. Kent Edney. And just before we start, I just, on behalf of council, just want to say thank you to our CAO and his team, who have put in a incredible amount of work. And I just want to thank our CAO for his leadership with this, but also to your staff as well, your administration, for the incredible amount of work that has happened to get us to where we are today. And looking forward to the presentation that's going to, I'm sure, both outline the successes and some of the challenges that the city of Chestermere is facing. So with that intro, Mr. Edney, you're up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to council, just want to echo and emphasize some of the mayor's early comments there. Really want to thank my staff throughout the organization, especially those involved in the budget, but those that weren't as well, because those that weren't were picking up a little bit of slack for those that did have to take a bunch of time to go ahead and push this budget through. We were on quite a bit of a condensed timeline this year. We've talked about that quite a bit openly, that this process probably should have started back in May or June, ended up getting started in October. So it was a mad rush, for no better term, to ensure we got this in and got the information in. We ran into some challenges along the way, going through the process, understanding maybe how things had been done in the past versus how best practices state we should do things going forward. So like you said, there's been quite a bit of work that's gone into this, a lot of passion, a lot of thought. I really want to thank the managers. When we went back to the managers and said, what can you do to help out? To a T across the board, people moved things, people looked for cost reductions, people thought about projects in detail, whether we needed to do them, whether we could push them off, or whether they were nice to have. So I think what you'll find, and what you found over the past 6 years of budget discussions, or so it feels, maybe last couple of weeks of budget discussions, is there has been a lot of work into this, and a lot of just a lot of collaboration through council and through administration into this. So I'll get started and get into talking about a little bit about our capital budget and our operating budget. So just on the agenda, I'm going to make some opening remarks outside of what I just did, a little bit related to the process and related to some of the challenges that the organization is and was facing going through this. We'll jump into the capital budget. Then we'll talk about our interim operating budget for the city. Then we'll talk about the utility budget. We talked about this at council meeting yesterday. The dissolution is not going to be complete by December 31st, so we therefore have a separate utility budget to review and approve. That's been part of our budget process, has been your review, but because it's not in as part of the city, we need to have a separate motion to approve that. I'll talk a little bit about what the budget timelines look like for final budget. I'll explain a bit of the difference between interim and final here in a couple minutes. And then hopefully we'll get into council approvals. There is an item on the agenda for a closed session. If at any point we're going through this and council feels like, hey, we need to talk about something, we can do that here openly in public. I'm going to be open to questions. Ms. Joel Hall-Watt, Ms. Armitage are here to hopefully help on some of those if you have them, but we also have the option at any point to go into closed session if there's something sensitive you would like to talk about.
Yeah, sorry. So just for a point of clarity, then, essentially looking at this outline here for this presentation, we will then be, I know this may seem obvious, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that we will be handling items 3.2 and 3.3 essentially at the same time.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, the two are somewhat integrated.
Yeah, right.
All right. So I'll just stay on this slide right now just for some opening remarks. I think one important a comment that I had made, but I think it was likely in our closed sessions, and I know council's been getting some questions on this, so this is really just for the public or anybody who might be listening, is the question has come up of why have we been doing all of our budget deliberations in camera in a closed session? And so the main component of it is there's obviously part of it in the operating budget that's sensitive around personnel and wages and that kind of stuff, but from a capital and an operating budget as well. It's probably just best to use an example. If we put out a line-by-line, project-by-project budget, my experience, and I think there's other municipalities who've seen this experience as well, is if we put in that we have $1 million in a budget for a project, well, our bids tend to come in at $1 million. So it ends up being sort of a not fulfilling, but a self-depreciating prophecy in that we put together a budget, we make all sorts of comments about how we're going to do everything we can to reduce costs, but meanwhile everybody bidding on every project knows exactly what our budget is and therefore knows what they can bid and still, be considered as an acceptable bidder. Smart on their part, maybe not so smart on our part. So I think that's the intent of this particular process, and I believe council's been on board with this, of what you're going to see today is some higher level roll-ups into types of projects, roads, utilities, that kind of thing. You'll see a breakdown by department, but you're not going to see a detailed X dollars for X project spreadsheet. What we will do, though, as time goes through, again for transparency, as we go through the procurement process, as we go through the negotiating contract stage, and we have project X and we have a budget for $1 million, for example, and we get lucky and procure it for $950,000, that's information we will release at that time once we've gone through that process. That hopefully allows us to get a true competitive bidding process on things. So this information will come public. You will be able to understand how much we've allocated to each project. Just will be as we go through this process into final budget, and then throughout the year we'll continuously have updates to council where we can talk about these specific items. So any questions from council on that front? All right. Well, let's go into our 2025 capital budget.
I believe Councillor Warzanowski has raised a hand.
Oh.
So maybe let's
Yes,
because sorry, 1 second, Councillor Warzanowski. Because the screen's behind me, Ledge Services, can you just kind of flag me down if Councillor Warzanowski raises his hand? Because I don't have a screen in front of me that I can see. Thank you. Councillor Warzanowski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean. My only question was through you to Mr. Edney. I appreciate you sharing with the public whenever we come under or over budget. That is information is certainly valuable to the public. Maybe just give us a little bit more detail on kind of what dollar amount, because obviously we don't need to share every single budget item but there's probably dollar amounts where it may be of value to the public on where we save or are over budget on certain projects. Like, is there a dollar amount or something like that?
Variance report.
Yeah, so Councillor Worzanowski, there are dollar amounts that are going to be broken down per area, so to speak. And so perhaps if at the end, I'm sure that there's going to be further questions from all of council, including yourself, about further detail that may be outlined. So, but there are bigger numbers that are going to be demonstrated right now. And then perhaps we can hold off on other ones that we're looking for until the end of the presentation.
That wasn't my question. My question was through you to Mr. Edney in regards to showing the public during the process of our project execution at what dollar amount can the public expect us giving them the roll up, because that, I think that is an important information, as you had suggested. Not in today's presentation, but let's say you have Project X, as you gave as an example, that was $1 million. Is $1 million that threshold that you'll be presenting that to council as we complete these projects?
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Worzanowski, I don't think I'm expecting to have a particular dollar value. I think what I'm looking to do going forward is when we have our quarterly variance reports, we'll do something similar for the capital budget. So any project that happens to be on there, as long as it's at the stage where we've done the procurement or have got our bids or have got our project, what I'm hoping to do is have capital project A with what we budgeted, what the tender was at, stage of completion, and how much we've spent to date. So I'm not necessarily looking at it from a dollar value, but would look to probably rank that on a spreadsheet somehow from highest dollar value to lowest. So at some point, if you're not interested in the $30,000 projects, you can stop reading. Does that kind of address what you were hoping to see?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Excellent. Great recommendation. I like your thinking. Let's move on. Thank you.
All right. So as we get into the 2025 capital budget, I don't have the number in front of me, but I do believe we brought forth roughly about $28 million for council consideration in the 2025 deliberations. Today, respectfully asking council to approve a capital budget of $25,101,149. As I mentioned in the opening remarks, we're going to look at this a couple different ways through a couple different lenses. The first look is really how do those projects break down into what's in council's strategic plan and what's in council's strategic priorities and what's important to the community. Again, just highlighting on this, at some point we will have what the roads are, what the infrastructure is, etc., and have some of that clarity on it as we go forward here. I can probably highlight at least a couple of key projects in this is going to be investigation and hopefully moving forward if we have collaboration with the City of Calgary and the province on expanding Chestermere Boulevard to the west, 17th Avenue, up to the Calgary city limits. So that's one of our big projects in here. Another is prepping school sites. Of course, that's a big council priority. Of course, on the utilities side, there's just lots of infrastructure that we need to build to service our growing community. In the community safety aspect, that's your fire department. Some of the safety initiatives we've talked about ideas like raised crosswalks at intersections in school zones and some of our busier intersections with a lot more traffic and pedestrian safety. So we've got some initiatives in around that. And we've got some initiatives we'll talk about in January that didn't quite make it into the budget, but just related to some of the other infrastructure concerns happening in the area. And I think council wanted some more information on. Again, just for the public, this is considered a final capital budget, but at any point during the year, council can add items to our capital budget through a council resolution. You can also remove anything from our capital budget via council resolution. So that will be our plan. This gives you just a quick breakdown. As you can see, most of our money is being spent on roads and infrastructure, and then on the utilities side, followed by schools, and then just our general maintenance. I think we're going to try and hit a few key projects in the community that residents have been asking about this year. as far as paving some areas, repairing some sidewalks, and just generally keeping upkeep on our roads and infrastructure. As we get into, I had talked about it in some earlier budget discussions, some of it in public. We're going to have some pretty key projects that council's going to be asked to consider in the coming years. This will again be much more detailed come final budget time. I talked about it in a quick presentation, I believe part of it publicly, of one of the things we're doing is working as administration with finance to really understand the city's ability to fund all of our infrastructure projects as we move forward. So that's why this focus today really is just on 2025. We've got some numbers and some forecasts for the future, but we'll refine that in a lot more detail over the next 3 or 4 months. So a couple key projects coming up that everybody is well aware of: a new recreation center, a second fire hall, and something big that's in our 5-year forecast is the replacement of the bridge on Chestermere Boulevard over Chestermere Lake. So those will be, again, something we start to discuss as time goes on. Just another way to look at the capital budget request broken down by department. Again, it's 25.1 million. As you can see on this slide, again, most of that expenditure comes in the growth and infrastructure department. That's dealing with our roads, bridges, sidewalks, utilities, and all of our infrastructure that way. Operations, again, dealing with some of these maintenance and some of these rehabilitation projects, and of course new equipment replacing aging fleet and those kind of things. Another way to look at the capital budget here is looking at it by funding source. So I think everybody can kind of read what's going on the screen. 2 big keys that I really want to stress at this point is in 2025, we are not taking money out of the restricted reserves at this point to fund any of our capital projects. We are also not taking on any new debt to fund our capital projects. So right now, again, the big majority of our projects are funded through the off-site levies and the off-site levy model. That'll be something that's coming back to council I think in January, if not early February, to talk about that entire process, what it looks like, how it works, how we fund it in the long term. And then the rest of the projects are funded by our grants that we receive either from the federal government under CCBF or from the provincial government under what was the MSI initiative and now is the LGFF initiative. So got all 3 of those in there because we do have some MSF funds that we are able to still carry forward and spend at this point. So talked about this a little bit. This is looking for that 5-year look forward plan. Again, $25 million this year. As you'll notice, next year becomes quite a big jump up in our capital expenditures. There's 2 things that factor into the 2026 budget right now. One is the recreation center, a new recreation center over on the land we acquired a few months ago. The other big ticket item here is in the community safety department for the second fire hall. This isn't necessarily a cash flow forecast. We are not going to build an entire recreation center in 1 year, but I think it's very important and prudent that when we do go commit to a project of that size, we understand that we have either the full amount of the money in the bank or the complete means to actually fund that entire project. So for some people maybe watching or seeing this, what I've seen of past budgets will tend to have, for example, that 45 million split out to 17 million in 2026, 18 million in 2027, and 10 million in 2028. That can lead to some dangerous things if you haven't actually approved that money and something happens, a future council comes, current council's in and decides, hey, we don't have enough money to go forward, and now you've spent $28 million on a half-built rec center. So that's why maybe these numbers look a little bit different than has been presented in the past, but it's the same sort of philosophy of it will take a few years to spend some of this money. So again, we got a couple years where that jumps up significantly. 2027 right now is got the bridge in it, which is a big big part of that $32 million in the growth and infrastructure department in 2027. Again, these numbers are something we're going to work on with a fine-tooth comb, really get a good understanding of, are these numbers reasonable? Do they make sense? Do they meet the expectations of the community and what we're planning to provide? And this will come back as more of a comprehensive look forward exercise come final budget. And I think it's also something that we'll continue to look at as part of our variance analysis and reports. Rather than just talking about the differences in what we've spent, we can also spend some time talking about what our financial position looks like and how that's changing through time. So just want to make council, make the public aware these things are on council and administration's radar, and they are some big ticket items that will pose some challenges for the city in the coming years here. So if we move from the capital budget, looking into our interim operating budget, what we're coming with a request for this year is $55,557,016. So this has a couple of key assumptions built into this operating budget. Again, we've talked, I think, in public a little bit, but extensively in camera. One of the challenges really coming out of this budget this year is there's two things that were done in last year's budget. One was a roughly $3.3 million planned withdrawal from the restricted surplus account to fund our operating budget. Another thing I know that we've talked a lot about is our franchise fees. In the past, those used to go into the restricted surplus account. Those are still in our operating budget. That was a really difficult thing to be able to take out at this point in the operating budget, but going forward, that is in the forecast. We'll talk about that a little bit as we get to those forecast pages. Couple of key assumptions I've highlighted. I think the two biggest ones that have an impact, we're not planning for an increase to the municipal tax rate. I will be clear, that does not mean that people's tax bill does not go up. If the value of your property went up and you multiply it by the same tax rate, you're going to have to pay a little bit more. So that's factored into here. We'll talk a little bit about what those numbers and assumptions look like, but it is not an increase to the tax rate at this point. Again, I've hit on there's no withdrawal from the restricted surplus. A couple of key points that just go on the revenue side is we've worked with our assessment team to understand what the assessment growth rate in the city looks like. We are using about 12% as a increase in the value of the current assessment base. And then we're also assuming an assessment base growth of about 10%. That's the new houses that are being built and coming online in 2024 that will then impact on the 2025 numbers. One other thing that just to discuss, because it is public sector, these numbers that we talk about here do not include amortization in them. You'll see that as part of some of the documents we put out for the public, that our actual budget will be $64.1 million. That's because we'll have included amortization in there, but it's a non-cash item that comes as a draw from equity on the balance sheet. So I think it's a little more prudent to talk about cash in and out of the door than necessarily some of those accounting transactions that just offset each other. So again, looking at the interim operating budget, I've talked about the total number. It's up a little bit from last year's approved operating budget. Again, if you went to our website, I think you'd see around 62 million is our approved operating budget. That again include the amortization and a subsequent revenue item to offset that amortization. So that's the difference in those numbers here. I think one thing, just more from a clarity perspective, especially for the public, is in our budget of 55.5 million, about 42.2 million of that is actually money that the city is expending on things within the city. So in that $55 million operating budget, we have our education taxes that the city collects for the province as part of the tax process, but then we funnel those right back through to the province to pay for education, schools, that kind of thing. That's about $13.4 million in the operating budget. We do have a very, very small amount of designated industrial property. I just included it in there, so if someone was doing the math, the math wouldn't be off by $3,300. So again, just taking a little break into how taxes are collected. We are budgeting to collect about $38.7 million of taxes. Again, 25.3 of that is actually for the city, for the municipality to use to fund our operating budget. The other 13.3 million is education tax on behalf of the provincial government. And I already talked about the next 3 points there. So looking at our interim operating budget, I hope this shows up all right on the screen. This is a little bit of a breakdown of how our revenues are coming in versus our expenses. So really quickly, you can notice that we've got $38.7 million in property taxes. As I mentioned, about 25.2 of that is for the city use. We get $1.6 million in provincial operating grants. That's the LGFF program, the Local Government for School Framework that the province provides back to us. We have some investment revenue. A big part of our operating budget and something that increased this year is our user fees and charges. Those are our development permits, our building permits, our subdivision applications, our building inspections, all of that kind of revenue that comes in that way. And then some of the fines and penalties and license, that's your CPO revenue. That's business licenses, pet licenses, all that kind of stuff that rolls into that category. The other revenues line item is essentially, we do get some donations into like our community support services department, where they get some small monetary donations in to help fund some of their programs. And then one of the big things is some expectation of another mayor and council, another successful mayor and council golf tournament at some point before the next election. Again, that will be money we expect to come in, and it'll go out like we talked about in September, of just an in and out from a revenue perspective, but it's in here for budgeting purposes. So we don't have to do that as a separate motion unless we'd like to in the future. Big key for our expenses is personnel. Personnel is roughly half of our municipal operating budget expenses. We have 171 staff plus roughly 50 seasonals that come on in the May through September. We have some of our seasonals, even staying around till this point if they have availability. So this is to cover our fire department, our CPOs, all of our staff in City Hall, everybody up at community operations. There's a fairly significant jump, roughly about 10% on this from last year's budget to this year's budget. Two things are, we're getting a lot more hires in 2024 to try to catch up from some of the cuts that happened in the previous administration. And then this includes a cost of living allowance that's dictated per our union agreements for those. And then we only have a couple of new positions included in this budget. I think it's 2.5 new positions, I guess I would say in City Hall for no better terms, between City Hall and community operations. We do have money in the budget for another peace officer, which should help us on the bylaw enforcement side as well. I know we'll have some discussions come final budget of what that makeup really looks like. The other thing that's in here is essentially one full-time firefighter for every shift. So how that's broken out is, as we start to do our work towards planning for a second fire hall, and not just that, but also to keep up with the increased number of calls, maintain our service level in the city, we need to add some staffing to our fire hall. We've talked about this again in some fairly detail. One thing with the fire department is with the 24-hour shifts, if we need one firefighter, we actually need 4. Because there are 4 shifts, one person works each shift. So in the budget, We have 4 firefighters coming on sometime in the spring. There's also a placeholder for another 4 to come in sometime in the fall. That would be more geared towards the addition of a second fire hall. And this gives council and administration some time between now and then to work through the feed study on the fire hall, to then understand what are we building, it, how do we go forward, and come up with an operating plan for that. So those are some key additions into the personnel expense. Just wanted to address here in public. We actually saw a reduction in one of our budgeted items this year. That's in the business and training expenses. It's really related to 2 items. One is our reduction in recruiting costs. Hopefully now that the organization's stabilized, we're not going to spend as much money advertising and hiring people. And the other is a reduction in training and development. And I know that sounds contrary to what I've been talking about in public, is we're going to spend more effort on training and development of staff. It was just an enormous budget last year. I think it was on the neighborhood of $400,000 or $500,000. We only spent, I think, about $160,000. So we have $250,000 in there, which is $1,500 an employee. Again, and that's to cover off professional development that people need to keep for their certifications, for their professional designations, as well as help managers, anybody, just to improve their skill set, to deliver better service to the citizens of Chestermere. Rentals and leases, we've seen a change there. This is something that council again discussed in great detail. This is to acquire some extra office space. I think the intent is likely going to be to have our community support services team in there and collaborate with our not-for-profit groups in the city to set up, I don't know if hub is the right term, but at least a better place than the cramped space we have in City Hall right now. This will be just across the street, couple steps away from City Hall entrance, so should allow the department to continue function cohesively with the city. That's the reason for that particular group, is that particular group just makes more sense to have their own space. The real driver for it is, I know council's been through City Hall. We have very few offices that have one person in them. Most are 2. Oh, we're back. Number of offices, we have 3 or 4 people in an office. We've got a lot of cubicles, and we are just out of space at this point to physically put people in. And again, would like to be able to address that, and then again plan for the next coming years of a little bit of growth in the organization as we look to catch up with the growth in our city. And there's an opportunity right now to take advantage of some space that's available close by. Let's go back here. Oops, sorry. Really only other item I think that's noteworthy to talk about in here is our contracted and general services. Again, with some significant budget cuts over the past years, this increase is really just back to trying to get our maintenance standards, get some of the work back up that we've maybe neglected a little bit in 2024. It's also got some extra costs in for consulting side of things as we work through the utility dissolution and what we want to do with it, and then of course work and continue to implement some of the findings from the Deloitte report and the minister's directives. Other than that, there's not any real material changes. Again, as noticed, we're forecasting a balanced budget in 2025 right now. Just another way, again, of looking at our interim operating budget. This is just split out by department, just to give some transparency on where the most revenue is coming in and where the highest expenses are. Same line items as the previous slide. Again, just broken down between our individual departments. You'll notice most of our revenue comes in on the taxes and general government side of things. Our next biggest one is our community growth and infrastructure, and then you'll see some revenue coming in just in how we assign it through the different departments, adding up again to that $55 million of total revenue. Again, on our expenses side of things, looks like our taxes and general government is the highest. That's our requisitions that we put out to the province. That's our funding of the library and the Marigold Library System. In community operations, this is our people out there plowing the streets, mowing parks, just taking general care of the community that way. Community safety, that's our CPOs and fire department. Corporate services, that's essentially City Hall, if you want to think of it that way. That's getting our taxes done, our budgets done, our planning, our development and permits, all that kind of thing. And then community growth and infrastructure, again, as I kind of mentioned, that's where all the development, our planning, engineering, utilities, et cetera, is run out of. So one last step, just probably my second last slide maybe here on this presentation, and I kind of talked about it at the start. It's a bit of a change here at the last minute of how this was going to be presented. Again, we heard yesterday that the dissolution of the utility company is not going to be complete by December 31st. There's some legal steps that need to be moved through in the new year, so we'll continue to work with that. So for now, at this point, this will be treated as a separate budget. Again, council is the board of directors of the utility company, so a resolution here, which we heard yesterday, a resolution here to approve this budget is the same as making a resolution in a board of directors meeting. Not a lot of changes. How the team built this budget was to keep utility rates the same as they are right now, but account for the growth in our community, the growth in new residents, the growth in water consumption, et cetera, et cetera. So really, as you work through here, you'll see an increase in revenues in nearly every category. We do contract's not the right word. We do procure our water from the city of Calgary. We send our wastewater back to the city of Calgary. We also, in the fixed and variable rates, are our charges for recycling when we take our recycling to the recycling center. Landfill costs, and then costs for disposal of our organics are all in there in a fixed and variable component, which should be similar breakdown to what people see on their bills. On the expenses side, again, our biggest expense is the purchase of our water and the sending of our wastewater back to the city of Calgary. Under contracted services, that's the services that EPCOR contracts out to the utility for the day-to-day operation and maintenance of everything in our facility, in our city. The other contracts are with the city of Chestermere. That's where when we have engineers, we have finance people doing work on behalf of the utility, that gets billed out to the utility, and then the city sees it as a revenue item on the city's operating budget. So as these two were to get amalgamated, there'd be no net difference there. That would just be a cross out of revenue versus expenses. In the other services category, those costs are generally related to the work being done on the dissolution of the utility company. For goods and supplies, this is our utilities at the lift stations. This is the chemicals that go in to treat odors. It's all those little consumable items that the city needs to purchase to continue to run our utilities. General administration is insurance, bank fees, legal fees, accounting fees. Again, there's a significant jump in 2025 budget, and that's related to accounting, et cetera, needed to finalize up the dissolution of the company and move that into the city. Financing costs, that's repayment of debt. Those are the principal and interest payments that are needed for next year. Right now it is running a small deficit of about $77,000. That's something we'll work through here to refine a little bit more before we get into final budget and try to get that balanced. Because it is a utility, it's not part of the city yet. There isn't a MGA requirement for this budget to be balanced. So this is just where we're at in the process. For all intents and purposes, on $20 million, it's balanced at $77,000. So we'll work on that to show it is balanced once it comes into the city. And then the only other thing I want to touch on here real quickly is just what the rest of the process looks like. So again, I had talked about this in my introduction before we started this started the budgeting process. The MGA requires a capital budget to be approved by the year end, but only requires an interim operating budget to be approved by the end of the year. So the main reason on the operating side is we need to set the tax rate to set our revenues in. And you can't properly set the tax rate until you know exactly what our assessment values look like. That is something we get in the springtime from Accurate Assessment. They've given us some preliminary numbers, but again, that work isn't finalized until the spring. Once we have that number in and we get our final requisition numbers from the province on the education tax, that then allows council to set the tax rate. And that's where council and administration can work through to make any adjustments to the budget if we needed. If revenues are looking to be less than what we budgeted for right now, we need to make some changes and reduce our operating. If they look like they're higher, that can be a discussion around either increasing some services, adding some money to the operating budget, putting that into restricted surplus. Those kind of discussions will happen at the final budget, likely in early April. So January through March, we'll get those numbers in. We'll take a look administratively at what the budget's doing. And if it looks like we might need to make any adjustments. In April, council will come back. We'll have some more deliberations, discussion, and approve a final budget, at which point finance can then back out the tax rate and council will approve the tax rate bylaw. That's the process that then kicks off mailing of tax notices and the whole tax collection process. And our taxes are generally due, Sandy, end of June or end of July here? End of July. So this process will certainly work at least backwards from that. There is a mailing date. There is time we have to send the notices out to work. So sometime in the spring, we'll come back and finalize this budget. And I've talked about a number of times we'll come back with a concrete, well thought out forecast for what the next 3 and 5 years of operating capital look like as well. So, unless there's any questions, I'm open, and that's the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you. I'm going to make a suggestion, council, that staying away from debate, we can do that within a motion that's on the screen, that we follow a similar process perhaps that we followed during this process when we were in camera, and break it into 3 categories. And so if you have any questions of administration, the 3 categories being capital, operational, and utility. And so my suggestion would be is if council has any questions or comments right now about the capital budget, these would be comments or questions. If there is a debate matter, then we can wait till the motion's on the screen and do it at that time. But opening up the opportunity for comments or questions from council specifically regarding the capital budget. No. Okay, I have one. My question would be, so you hinted at it. You hinted at there are some exciting projects that we are looking at, i.e. You hinted at raised crosswalks. You've hinted at some other exciting projects that are coming along the way. How can the public, what can the public expect in terms of communications that are going to be coming out with regards to, so we already talked about the idea that we're not necessarily talking about the dollar amount for these projects, but these are projects that have now been put into the capital budget. So what can the public expect to see coming out of City Hall over the next couple of weeks with regards to capital items?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through yourself to the rest of council. Very good question. And I did mean to address that, so I apologize, but I appreciate the question. So one of the things I had hoped to do, and I meant to do in here too, was just include some of these projects. Again, maybe not without a dollar amount assigned to them, but some to communicate to the public on behalf of council, what is council doing. So again, with the timelines of this project, if I'm being honest, I prepared this presentation this morning. So that's the kind of timelines we've been working on. And I think for final budget, I'd expect something quite a bit more comprehensive for council and for the public. But what I'm going to do is work with Sandy and with Ty and the communications team and try to put something together. I know Sandy and I have talked about, if you look at a lot of municipalities around us, they'll have an 80 or 100 page budget document. I know that sounds like a lot, but it gets into here's how your tax dollars spent. We spend $1.50 on this, and so on and so forth. So we'll work through in the coming weeks. If I could ask everybody to maybe have some patience into the new year, We are pushing up on Christmas right now. We do have a number of other things on the go, but we will get, at the very least, this presentation up, and then perhaps some more information I can add into here of, not speaking out of turn, assuming council approves it, raise crosswalks or something, paving of Sunset Beach parking lot. I've talked about 17th Avenue, some of those kind of things, and give some high-level projects on those important things, some school site servicing, those kind of things for the public. So hopefully in the next couple of days, we can have something as a baseline to get up, and then look early in the new year to have something more comprehensive to really outline what projects and priorities we're looking to address.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments with regards specifically to the capital budget from council? Okay, with that then, can I have the motion for the capital budget, please? Great, thank you. Can I have a councillor make the following motion, please? Councillor Sandboe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council approve the 2025 capital budget as presented.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from council with regards to the motion? Great, thank you. We'll call for the vote. Oh, sorry. Councillor Warzanowski.
If people haven't voted, I can still make a comment. Are we okay?
Yeah, you're good.
I just wanted to make a comment in review of the capital budget. I know that residents, I know that me as a councillor, am happy to see that most of our capital budget is going towards infrastructure. So well done to administration. You heard the residents loud and clear. And I'm looking forward to voting on this motion.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions from council? With that, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Warzanowski, do you vote in favor of the motion?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Great, thank you. And that's carried. Congratulations, administration, on all of your work, and council. We have a 2025. I think I just saw you take a breath for like the first time in 3 weeks there, Mr. Edney. I think I see you breathing again. It's quite nice, actually. With that, now we'll move to our second one. Following the same process, council, are there any questions or comments with regards to the presentation? Again, not for debate at this time until we get into the motion. Are there any comments or questions with regards to the operational budget, starting with Councillor Warzanowski?
Thank you, Mayor Dean. My question through you to CEO Mr. Edney. I have a few questions, not really a few questions, but just want to ask if these following items were included as part of the budget. Number one, we were happy to renegotiate our water contract with the City of Calgary. Was the new rates reflected in the budget? And
Sorry, let's go.
ask all of them at once if you want.
Sure.
Do you want all at once?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the water question is one. The second one is, with the province cutting funding of the CMRB, did we budget for continuing to support the CMRB as part of our operating budget? And those are really the only two questions I have. I have a few more, but I can save them.
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Warzanowski and the rest of council, the answer to both questions is yes. So the water rates shows up in the utility budget, and the CMRB fees we've kept in there. I think we've talked a bit about the CMRB. We've heard it's going to be voluntary, but right now the legislation says we shall be part of it. So we've included the money to continue to contribute our share of the funding to it. We have not added anything if our share of funding were to increase due to that regulation, if we were to voluntarily decide to stay. But there is the same amount of funding as we had for 2024.
Thank you. And on the water question, that reflects the new rates, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. because those should be expected to come in lower than previous years. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, specifically regarding the operational budget? Okay. Can I have the motion for the 2025 interim operating budget, please? Can I have a councillor make the following motion, please? Deputy Mayor Randhawa.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the council approve the 2025 interim operating budget as presented.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions with regards to the motion? I apologize. I'm going to make this comment within the motion. I think it would be great. One of the slides in here that I really appreciated was the breakdown of how tax dollars work, how much stays in the municipality, how much goes to the province, and I think it would be great if administration could, if that could somewhere be captured as part of our communications about the budget, whether that be through our social media channels, online, whatever the case may be. But I thought that breakdown was a great slide and would love to see that captured. Councillor Warzanowski, I see a hand.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dean. And I echo your commentary on how the money was broken down. Two questions in regards to the budget before approval is I did notice that we do have account for grants. Do we expect the same amount of grants as part of the budget? And then secondly, with the $70,000 budget deficit, do we expect to have, I know this is an interim budget, do we expect to work towards a completely balanced budget as we close our financials by the end of next year?
Sorry, can we hold on just 1 second? Is the utility being voted on separately? Yeah, so I believe Councillor Warzanowski, can you hold the question on the $70,000 deficit? Because I believe that's in relation to the utility, not the operating.
Oh yeah, that's right. 7862 is the utility. My
That's
mistakes. My only question would be on the grants. I know on the working capital, or I guess the operating budget, as we call it, do we expect the same amount of grants, and what is the plan in regards to applying for grants? I know that we've been very active more recently. Do we expect an increase in applications, and do we expect a similar amount of revenue generation through grant application as part of the operating budget?
All right, thanks for the question. Through the chair to Councillor Warzanowski and the rest of council. So I just brought up the page again that talks about government operating grants in here. So that's a number that we already know what's coming under LGFF, the local government fiscal framework. That's something, it fluctuates based on how the revenues of the province fluctuates. That's the new model that the municipalities, I'll use the word agreed to. I'm not sure if that's the right term exactly. But that's something we know actually years in advance because it's modeled off of a couple years previous for provincial revenue. As far as the grants, I think you're more specifically getting into is grants to fund some of our projects that are not accounted for in here. So in our revenues, we do have some of the grants we know for certain we're getting for operating from the province are included in here. What we don't have in here is projects and grants we're going to apply for in the future. We have the full cost of the project, and then we will actively search out the grants. And if we get a grant, that'll help bring us into a positive variance on that particular line item. So it should help the city as we move through the year come to hopefully potentially having a little bit of surplus. A real good example, it was talked about council meeting, I think at the start of December, was we applied for a grant for 50% of the cost to complete the Chestermere Boulevard expansion. So that grant is not accounted for in here anywhere because we don't know if we'll get it or not. The second part of your question, yes, we are going to be very active this year in chasing down grants, in applying for grants. We have a grant writer available to us who we've engaged. We've got a couple options in the operating budget through decisions council's going to make moving forward about getting some more assistance in on not just the grant writing, but the seeking out and finding of these grants. So kind of a long-winded answer to say, yes, that's going to be a very high priority for administration is to try to find as much revenue and funds we can elsewhere. I think a big term that I want everybody in the organization to think of, and somebody hit it yesterday really well, is we are a large not-for-profit. And that's the way we're going to operate. That's the way we're going to think. We're going to try to leverage every dollar we invest into another dollar or two if we can and where appropriate. And we're going to continue to spend money as though we're a not-for-profit, and we really need to manage our expenses. So long-winded answer to say yes, we're going to put a lot of effort into grants next year.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Woznowski, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the answer, Mr. Edney, because I think all of council has expressed a desire and a passion to see us go after as many external funding dollars that can help our municipality as possible, which is why I'm also excited about the work that all of us on council have been doing in making connections with whether it be our provincial ministers and MLAs, or whether it be other members of other municipalities and sitting on boards and things like that, ensuring that we are finding, we're turning over every rock we can to be able to do that. So again, certainly appreciate the question and the answer, as this is a huge area of passion, I believe, for this entire council. Councillor Schindler.
Hi, thank you.
Your mic went off. Sorry, Councillor Schindler, your mic turned off. There you go.
Oh, it was on a second ago. My keyboard must have knocked off. I just wanted to ask the question of, can we expect similar service levels as we did in the last year for our residents in 2025?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Schindler and the rest of council. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. We really haven't, we've added a couple positions in the organization really to try to address some of our major deficiencies and backlog we have in processes and things we're doing. One thing I'm going to give a big shout out here to the community operations team. We are taking on significant amounts of new roads, new parks, new green spaces, pathways, all this kind of stuff. And we're not adding really any money on the personnel side. So my challenge to them has been to keep doing the good work, providing the level of service they are within the means that they've got. And I think they're up to the task. So I would expect us to still continue to have a wonderful, beautiful city into 2025.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I too would like to echo the last year's work that our city crews have done has been absolutely stellar, and I have very few criticisms, if any at all, for anyone in our organization. We've come a long way in just a few months, certainly the last year, and kudos. Thank you. You guys, I keep getting told this week that it's up to the city staff to make us look good. I reject that wholeheartedly. I think that the city staff need to shine on their own because you guys do amazing work and you keep us looking good on your own. But I love you guys. You guys are great. Thank you.
Awesome. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to administration and Mr. Edney, it's more of a comment than a question, and I just want to kind of point out to residents really that in the capital and the operating budgets, we are being fiscally responsible while still providing service and the value that we've come to expect. So that's where my kudos is. It was a great exercise you went through. I'm sure maybe an exercise in futility sometimes, but it was good. You did a great job. We are being responsible, I believe, and we're still trying to maintain that high level of service. So that's all I can ask, and yourself and administration has done a fantastic job. So thank you.
Final comments, questions with regards to the motion? Great, thank you. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Worzanowski, do you vote in favor of the 2025 interim operating budget?
I vote in favor of the 2025 interim operating budget.
Great, thank you. And that's carried. Wow. Mr. Edney was watching with anticipated bated breath there, I think. And then finally, we have our final one, which is our utility budget. And Councillor Worzanowski has already asked a question with regards to that. And so, Mr. Edney, I will turn that back over to you for an answer to Councillor Worzanowski's question with regards to the utilities budget.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back to Councillor Worzanowski's question from earlier. Yes, that $77,000 deficit is something we'll work through here in the coming months to try to get that balanced. I think I made some comments in camera that a utility shouldn't be running a deficit. It's generally something that should be running at the very least break even, if not in positive territory. So one thing we do have coming up is some work on our utility rate review. I am not suggesting or forecasting what will happen. I'm just stating, as has been stated to you, our rates have been flat for 2017. So 8 years nearly at this point. While we see some savings and stuff that Councillor Worzanowski mentioned, there's a lot of cost pressures that go into this budget as well. So again, I think to the team that developed this budget, they've done a great job to get us to that point. We will work to get that to at least a zero, if not slightly positive number through the coming months.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions with regards to the presentation for the utilities budget? With that, can I have a councillor make the following motion, please? Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council approve the 2025 1538974 Alberta Limited Utilities Budget as presented.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions from council? Councillor Worzanowski.
Thank you, Mayor Dean. I do have a comment through you, the chair, to Mr. Edney. While I understand we had the intentions of completing the dissolution of the utility by the end of this year, I'm glad to hear that we have intentions of completing the budgeting process of such intentions. But I would also like to comment that as we move forward in approving this budget, that we take a hard look at what's best for residents in regards to the future of our utility. But I do look forward to voting on this budget. But I certainly want to make it clear that the residents want to see the end of, for the city to make a decision on the utility.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions from council with regards to the motion that's on the floor? Great, thank you. Call for the vote. Councillor Worzanowski, do you vote in favor of the utility budget?
I vote in favor of the utility budget.
Great, thank you. And that's carried. Awesome. I think we're at the end of we might be at the end of our agenda here. Well done, everybody. I don't know, Mr. Edney, what are you going to do with all the extra time that you now have now the budget is done?
Just gonna put my feet up on my desk like I was before, right?
He did say that publicly. Did everybody get that?
I did say that publicly.
That was said publicly. That's on camera.
If I can, one thing
Absolutely.
I think that has been integrally important to this organization is exactly what just happened there. This is a very serious meeting. We're talking $55 million and $25 million, $80 million of taxpayer funds that we're working with and we're treating professionally and prudently. But we got to take a minute to laugh once in a while. We got to take a minute to joke around. And that's something I think if I can gave some kudos from administration to council. I think I'd like to thank council for taking this very seriously, but still enjoying it and still having some fun while we're doing it. Because if we don't, we might just go crazy.
Well, I would
already.
I would respectfully submit that we had 5 values that we outlined in our strategic plan, and certainly we just hit 2 of those values. Right, be encouraged that we make courageous decisions that are betterment for our community, but also fun. And I would say that there's a parts of this budget certainly reflect all 5 of the values that we outlined in our strategic plan. But I also think that this budget demonstrates our mission that we outlined in our strategic plan about being a leader in municipal services, recreation, and community connections. And so I would say kudos to both council and administration for the process that we've gone through and the different ways in which this budget reflects our strategic plan, and I look forward to seeing what administration comes forward with in terms of the communication to public and the integration of the budget to our strategic plan. Ms. Johal-Watt, I think I saw a hand waving.
Yes, through the chair to mayor and council, I just wanted to thank not only council, but a big thank you to our CAO who trusted us, who guided us and took the lead when he needed to take the lead to ensure that we got over the finish line. So I really appreciate that, Kent, and just wanted to ensure that everybody listening knows that there was a big push for us to ensure that we provided council with a transparent and prudent budget. And I stand by this budget, and I really look forward to the things that we can accomplish together as a unified team with council in 2025.
Great, thank you. With that, I believe we will call for a motion to adjourn. Can I have a councillor make Deputy Mayor Randhawa? Wow, that's the fastest I think I've ever seen your hand go. That was awesome. I didn't even have to wait. Councillor, yeah, there was. I heard the tendons in her shoulder go that time. Councillor Randhawa. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Randhawa.
Thank you, Your Worship, because this is this year's last meeting official. So I would like to adjourn this one. So that's why I raised my hand a bit higher than normal.
Yes, absolutely.
I move that the council adjourn the special meeting of council at 2:56 p.m.
Great, thank you. Call for the vote. Councillor Warzanowski, I'm assuming you're okay with adjourning the meeting?
Yes, and I want to wish everybody a great holiday and a Merry Christmas. I definitely vote in favor of adjourn.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Call for the vote. Yep. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. To our public, I hope I echo what Councillor Warzanowski said. Wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and a happy holiday season. And we look forward to continuing to serve you in 2025. Thanks, everyone.